All right. It is 7 p.m.
Let them in.
All right. I am admitting.
It's only 20+.
Hey, there's Lillian. How are you? And there's Boot Money. You guys are like 1, 2, right there in the center for me. That is great. And I see Mary's on and Heather's on. Oh, and there's Mira. Hey, Mira. How are you? All right. Let's see who else we got that's popping in here. Lots of folks. See James is there. Joanne. See Patricia. Oh, and our favorite cat from California is there. But I see he's changed his name to NT. All right. Sarah is with us. Thanks everybody for joining tonight. We're letting people come in here. We had a tremendous amount of signups, and they're they're coming in 3 at a time right now. So in a second we'll have Ori and Nora. Uh, I see Beth Ann has joined us. Not sure what's happening, Ori. You're having a problem getting in. I hope you get in. See, Mary's joined us. Marilyn's joined us. Marilyn is on the beach today. Just never know where she's going to be. Uh, all right. Well, Ed, let's turn this over to you. It's 7:02. If you give us a kind of a little thumbnail of what's going on.
Absolutely. So thank you all for joining today. We're in the middle of not a foreign war, not a Ukrainian war or Iranian war, but a domestic civil war where our politicians are fighting each other over us and slicing and dicing us to choose the best voters for them. And this is really not really very good for us. It's good for them, but it's not good for us. So we'll get into it. We'll talk about why we have this gerrymandering war going on and what it means, what we can do about it. But first, a word from our sponsor.
And I believe that's where I come in here.
Yes, sir.
And it'll take me a second or two until my screen comes up. Ed, if you tell me when my screen comes up, I would appreciate
It's
it.
up. It's up. It's up. I see
All
it.
right, great. Well, folks, those that are attending and those that are joining, welcome to NWSOFA, Northwest Suburbs Organizing for Action. And you see our new logo up there with that little icon that like a directional pointer you have on maps pointing to the beautiful skyline of Chicago. 14 years ago, this is where we started, here in Chicago in what we call the Northwest Burbs, 6 townships. And then about 7, 8 years ago, we became part of Indivisible. And that has really spurred on our growth across the country. Indivisible has literally 2,900 chapters across the country. Each one of those little dots is a chapter. And even in the smallest of states, you'll see 3 dots. So we are everywhere. And, so it's really been a ride for us. And it's been so successful because we have great presentations almost nightly. Tonight, we have the new map wars, how gerrymandering is rewriting American democracy by Ed Spire, who is the the head of our Restore Our Democracy group in NWSOFA. So the reason that we have all these meetings and we have all these Zooms is to help you educate and get organized. And it's for you, nobody else. We hope that you can understand the facts when you get done. Uh, and that when you have a disagreement or a discussion, you can sharpen your arguments, that you can think critically and practice clear, concise uh, messages. And then we do this because we know that you have three audiences. You have the guy or the gal or whoever you're having a cup of coffee with at a local coffee shop, or maybe you're having a dinner with your family and you're just getting around to some of these discussions, or maybe you're leading the group and you want to present issues and you want to make sure that you're on track. So that is what we do. We want you to know more, speak stronger, and create change. Now, NWSOFA, you've seen our twin snowflakes. Now we have this on steroids. It is huge. Now, and that happened. Sorry about that, Ed. Because we literally had to add in our Substack, our Discord. We had to add in our Facebook Live, our YouTube Live, our rapid responses, and we had to add in youth outreach, how to hands-on, and our judicial and legislative um, groups. So now we literally have 22 issue teams and 20 communications teams. So in the red,
Bill, your snowflake has become a blizzard.
what?
A blizzard.
Well, yes, that's fine with me. Yeah. So this is what happens when you have a snowflake and you're struggling for days to try to add a couple more issue teams, and then you say, "Oh wait, I have AI," and then you have AI, and you use Perplexity, and then you use Chat GBT, and then you use Chat, and you get the best from each one of them, and then you have them marry it together. All right. So the real power of NWSOFA, I got to got to go to presentation mode there. Okay. So this last year we had over 600 Zoom events. Right now we're on track to do 720 Zoom events. And in that, there's probably about 50 or 100 that are in person. Our membership in the Northwest Burbs and kind of Illinois has grown to almost 17,000 in the last couple of months. And our Zoom members, people who join us from across the US, really across with two C's there, is now 27,000. These numbers are growing daily. And, you know, the secret sauce of our organization is that we have 30 all volunteer leads that work both in the communication side and on the issue sides. And as you can see, right in the, let's see, where is that? Red's right at the top, the fourth one over. He's our Restore Our Democracy co-lead, along with Jim McGrath, right next to him, which is another one of the co-leads. So just to give you an idea, these are the major presentations we had in the last 30 days. These are videos, or excuse me, these are the events that we've had. And you can see that starting on the upper left, it's Coffee and Conversation daily, Monday through Friday, on Happy Hour, 5 on Friday, sharing our story on the second Tuesday of the month. Then we have our Vision Forward, which is usually the first Wednesday of the month. Sharing our stories is the first, second Wednesday of the month. And then we have our Climate Change, which is usually the fourth uh, Tuesday of the month. Our Stand With Women did the American Dream, detained about some immigrants whose husbands were taken. Then we have our Sorting Soup, who just was on, just finished their program just before we joined here. And then we have Kara and we have other folks from Dr. Chris doing the What I Wish I Would Have Said ways to respond to people. We have our gun violence prevention group. We have our Stand with Women group, our No Lies Lab, where we work together with Indivisible Illinois and several other issue teams, other indivisible groups in the burbs to do social storming. And then you can see that we have our fiscal and economic team that's been running for 13 years strong every month on the third Tuesday. And that tonight we have this new map wars. Now, here's a little bragging about what we did. What we call an impact dashboard. You're going to love this. And during the month, 64 events, 20 YouTubes, 30 Substack articles, and Ed contributes to that. Almost 3,000 new members, 18 newsletters that we send out. Yes, we send out a lot. 354 YouTube views. That's those videos that we have, and over 4,687 of you all joined us online. So it's a hell of a program, guys. So tonight, as Ed does this presentation, we ask you to put your questions in chat. As we always ask you, start out in all caps, a big QUESTION, all in caps. And then at the end of the presentation, Rudy, will be gathering these, and then she'll consolidate those and ask those questions to Ed. And it will go for as long as Ed will be able to go, which is usually a little past 8:30. So with that, we're going to take it to Ed on the new map wars. Ed, it is all yours.
Thank you, Bill, and thank you for all you do. Nobody could manage this enormous organization the way you do. Let me figure out how to share my screen again. There it is.
I thought you were going to say nobody could create that crazy graphic.
No. That was just AI doing that. But anyway, so, okay. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So we're going to talk about, let me focus that. Okay. We're going to talk about what's going on, the legal background of why this is allowed to happen and how it's been spreading. We're going to talk about the kind of impact it has on it right now for this coming election and for the future. And most importantly, we're talking about how we can reform our systems. And a lot of this comes back to what has happened here in Illinois. And you will find out that Illinois has been a leader in this area and can continue to be one. We'll talk about the current legislation efforts. And of course, we always have a call to action. And I just want to say that reform choices, when we talk about reform choices, a lot of people say to me, Ed, everything is pretty screwed up and change is hard. And I just want to remind y'all, all y'all, and that's a Texas phrase. I want to remind all y'all that change is hard, but when you've had a crisis, when you've had an emergency, you can build the political will to make a change. After the Civil War, when we all knew that the stuff had really hit the fan hard and we had to make some changes, we found the political will to make some amendments to our Constitution. And my sincere hope and belief is that when we get through this MAGA period and we get all that past us after 2026 and 2028, in the time frame of around 2029, 2030, we should be able to make a strong argument to build the political will to make some significant changes in how our country is governed. So I want to focus on that stuff at the right point and leave you all with the idea that we can make a change. So, right now, we used to think that redistricting happened once a decade after the census, but that doesn't seem to be the case anymore. Now we get this mid-decade redistricting. It's more and more states are doing it. More and more political actors are beginning to treat map drawing as a recurring tactic, something that you do all the time instead of just once every 10 years. And that shift matters, because once redistricting becomes part of the permanent campaign, you do it all the time, the entire incentive structure changes. Every favorable court ruling, every state house victory, or every institutional opening can become an invitation to redraw the districts again, which is just crazy in my mind. So let's be frank about this. Both parties have done this stuff in the past, but right now, this was really kicked off when Trump told the Republicans to be very aggressive and do it in the run-up to the coming midterms. He challenged red states to do as much as they can to help try and control the House. We all know Texas moved first. Both sides play this game, but it does matter to realize that the war we're in right now was started by the other guy. And what we're doing is just retaliating in kind to what these guys are doing. So there was a big legal turning point. After Trump said, we need to leverage this as much as we can, the Supreme Court came in. The Supreme Court came in with a ruling regarding Louisiana, and they held that partisan gerrymandering are beyond the reach of the federal courts. In other words, the Constitution would not be used by federal judges as a tool to police partisan gerrymandering. But then, in the most recent decision in Louisiana, the court struck down Louisiana's, because what Louisiana had done is they had paid attention to the Voting Rights Act. And the Voting Rights Act had said, look, if you have a lot of minority voters, black voters, you need to make sure they have representation in Congress. So you might need to draw your lines such that these folks get a representative or two. And there were two congressional districts in Louisiana that had been drawn to make sure that minority black voters had a voice in our federal legislature. And that was challenged. And the Supreme Court came down and said, look, we have amendments that say you can't be racially biased in what you do. And they said, but when you make a district based on race, you're acting racially biased. And you can say, well, maybe in the past you needed to do this because the minorities weren't well represented. But now minorities are well represented. We've gotten past that stuff, so we don't need these protections anymore. So the federal law had constrained some racially harmful maps, but the court struck a lot of that down and said we don't need that, which is kind of silly because as soon as they struck it down, the southern states all reverted to their past practices of suppressing minority votes. So clearly, I mean, it's kind of like saying, look, you're not getting wet, and I know it's raining, but you're not getting wet, so you don't need that umbrella anymore. Really? Well, the umbrella is what's keeping me from getting wet. And so that was a ruling in Louisiana that really damaged the Voting Rights Act. So, and when they did that, they said, you can't just presume that this stuff is racially biased. It's more politically biased. And you know what? Political gerrymandering is legal. Maybe racial biasing is not, but political gerrymandering is legal. There's nothing in our Constitution or our laws that deny the right for legislatures to do politically based gerrymandering and focus votes in one party and dilute votes from another party. And that was interesting because the SCOTUS had kind of said, look, if it's really, really obviously racial, you got a point. But if it's just political, so what? And then this is late breaking news. This came up today. I saw this today. There was a shadow docket ruling. This is a shadow docket where the Supreme Court says they have an opinion, but they're not going to explain why. They're not going to explain how. They're just going to say, here's our direction. There was a case in Alabama because Alabama had a map that the lower courts had declared was really obviously biased against the black minority, obviously biased. to the point where the VRA, the Voting Rights Act, couldn't just be ignored. This isn't just political gerrymandering. This is racial gerrymandering. And now, in the Louisiana case, the Supreme Court appeared to say that that they would consider clearly racial gerrymandering as something to be disallowed. Uh, and all kinds of people look at that. What was going on in Alabama said Alabama is being stupid. They're bringing forth a map that clearly violates the principles that SCOTUS just announced in their Louisiana case. Well, what happened? What happened was on the shadow docket, the Alabama case was ignored by the Supreme Court. Supreme Court said we're going to let Alabama use that map, even though the lower courts had said it's really truly racially biased, because we think they'll win in the end. So what does that mean? It means that any idea that Supreme Court says might have some value, the Voting Rights Act, is nonsense, because they're going to ignore it anyway. Makes the court's own limiting language looks unstable. The court says one thing about what the law school forbids, and then it tolerates the conduct that appears to fit that description. So we just can't depend on the way the Supreme Court is interpreting the Voting Rights Act at any level at all. And so what does that mean? Well, if the federal courts won't stop partisan gerrymandering, and if the race-based pathway we have been using is now eliminated, well, we can't keep treating racial district disputes as the main or only doorway to reform. The racial pathway to justice here has been denied by the Supreme Court, which means to me we have to confront the base problem. The base problem is gerrymandering at all, for any reason, especially for political reason. We have to get to the point where we just outlaw gerrymandering, period. The only major restriction left standing was the prohibition of racial voting. And the courts have just said they're not going to pay anything to that anymore. So the question is no longer how to correct racial gerrymandering. The question now is how to reduce gerrymandering, eliminate gerrymandering for any reason, specifically for political reasons. That's where we are, folks. And the guys on the right started it. They started it in Texas. But it was obvious that escalation was going to occur. Red states draws for new maps. Blue states retaliated. Texas did something. California did something. One state after another on either side of the aisle is going to be ramping up the gerrymandering higher and higher. And that is going to damage our democracy over and over and over. And the problem is not just one party's problem. It's all our problem on both sides. And a legal environment that tolerates this crap produces a culture in which restraint looks irrational. Why should we hold back when they're doing this? Both sides are now full tilt to draw the lines, to maximize their political advantage, and the right word is to diminish the votes, disenfranchise the revolts of their political opponents anywhere and everywhere they can. That's what's happening. And now it's happening on both sides, because one side started and the other side is not going to just take it. Now, even with this escalation, there's an advantage to the Republicans here. The Brennan Center estimated that back in 2024, they had about a 16-seat structural advantage from this. And that's because there's more red states than blue states. So when the red states do this stuff, they can do it more than blue states can. There's just fewer blue states. And that's kind of a built-in tilt in the U.S. House. And it's decided by small margins, but it's still there. And when we talk about how what's going on now is affecting that, remember, there's isolated state gains, but there's the national effect on the full map. On the broader measure, the Republicans still appear to hold a pretty strong structural starting position in this kind of war. It's kind of like going into battle and knowing he's got more troops than you do. I mean, that's not always the only answer, but that's where we are. And but there's more to this than that. When somebody's pushing this kind of gerrymandering war, what they're doing is they're aggressively redistricting in a way to try and make sure that some districts that were competitive become purely partisan. Some districts in red states that maybe could have elected a blue candidate will no longer be able to do so. So the vice versa in the blue states. And what that means is that when you redistrict to strengthen a purple district, you're kind of reducing the strength of the surrounding red districts. You're taking some of that red and putting it in the purple district, or some of the blue and putting it in purple district. And that means you might be strengthening a purple district to bring it to your side, but you're also diluting the strength in the surrounding districts. And when they do this kind of thing, they do this based on the analysis of prior elections. In prior elections, we had so much strength in these red districts or these blue districts that we can afford to pour some of that strength into another competitive district to make it red or blue. But that's pretty fragile, because that depends on the next election is going to turn out the same way as the last one. And right now, I don't think the next election is going to turn out the same way the last one did, because public opinion has moved sharply from red to blue. So and this is something that it's not a sure thing, but this could happen. Some of those red states that have diluted some of their safe districts somewhat in order to make other districts apparently safe, they could end up with two districts that are neither safe, because the trend right now is so strongly blue. So that's a very fragile map. When public opinion moves sharply, some old safe district could be less secure than they thought it was going to be. Some new district they made may not be as secure as they thought it would be. So what could be a really clever map could be more vulnerable than they think. I'm not saying for sure this is going to happen, but it really could. It really could. That's why Jeffries, the Democrat House leader, Hakeem Jeffries, talks about a dummy-mander, a gerrymander that a dummy would do. Some Republicans have redrawn districts so aggressively that they overfit the past and misread the present. A bad national environment for Trump and the GOP, which we really do have, is stretching districts for one or more seat that may actually weaken their overall map. This is a genuine risk. It's not a certainty, but it's a risk. It's a risk that we will be watching. We'll be, and this is where turnout comes in. We need to work to push turnout in those kinds of districts through postcarding or telephone banking or whatever, to see where they have a weakness. They might have a weakness here. They might have a weakness there. I'm sure that the folks who run the phone banking or the postcarding will find those districts, and we should be pounding on them to try and break through what they thought was a safe district, an old one or a new one. Because when you count on old baselines, when things are changing rapidly, you could realize you've made a mistake, and we could take advantage of that. So, I'm arguing for broader structural response. We should still be clear that racial harm remains. Partisan and racial effects overlap. Clearly, I mean, they worry about, the southern states worry about their black voters because their black voters often vote Democratic. So partisan and racial effects overlap. A district change that can help one party diminish the other could be also diminishing minority voters, which is why we've been able to use the racial laws in the past to control this. We don't want to abandon the racial dimension, but we want to recognize that the legal avenue we built around racial discrimination is too weak now. SCOTUS has destroyed it. We can't use the idea that we're diminishing a racial minority is how we solve this problem. We need a bigger framework to solve this problem. We can't depend upon even the John Lewis Rights Act. We can't depend on a racial way of solving this. We need a political way of solving this. In the short term, for the summer and the fall, we're going to see a reduced competition. We're going to see incumbents being protected, increased legal and electoral uncertainty. We're going to have a less transparent relationship between public option and opinion and election outcomes, because public opinion generally amongst the general election voters doesn't impact the primaries. The primaries in gerrymandered districts are controlled by radical elements on both sides of the aisle. So this is dangerous, because that means the trust in our institutions are already low, and people are going to look at the candidates that are being brought forward and say, this is not somebody I really want to vote for, but I don't want to vote for the other guy either. And the U.S. House, the Congressional House majorities are very narrow. Even a little change can matter enormously. That's why gerrymandering here or there is not a technical matter. It's a direct issue of how our Congress reflects the democratic ideals, the democratic wishes of our population. So in 2026, the current maps give Republicans a structural advantage of roughly a dozen seats. We need to win the national House vote by 3 or 4 points to flip control. But if the national mood continues to be strong under Trump, their structural advantage won't be enough. We can easily see a blue wave coming that'll just crash through this gerrymander, especially where their maps have been stretched thin. So their over-aggressive miscycling remaps could become the dummy mandate that Jeffrey's just talking about. Maps that sacrifice durability for short-term gain in an attempt to hold the 2026 election when it would fail. I fully believe we're going to take the House, even with all the gerrymandering the red side has done so far. And what prediction markets agree with me. This is what the prediction markets have said. There's 18% chance that the House will be held by the Republicans, and an almost 80% chance they'll be held. And that's not just prediction markets. Polling shows the same kind of thing. But one of the points I want to make is that that's just 2026. That's not talking about the long-term problem, because what we said was there's a structural advantage on the red side from this stuff of about 12 seats. So yeah, we can overcome that right now because of how poorly these guys are doing and how badly they're viewed. But going forward, a 12-seat structural advantage on one side or the other is not something we can allow to stand. We just can't allow it. So when we look to 2028, the danger doesn't end here. If this current pattern, if this stuff is normalized, if we continue to redistrict to the max, if we continue to push the boundaries as far as possible in this redistricting war, it's very, very fragile. It's very obvious. It's very easy to see that it could just flip the other way in 2028. 2026 could just be a midpoint in a broader transition towards perpetual redistricting. Every few years, you try and do this to gain a political advantage over your opponent. And if the political class believes this is what we should be doing, we're in bad shape. We have to stop this stuff from happening repeatedly like this. We have to get back to where we do this every 10 years and not every time we feel we can stick the other guy with it. And doing this stuff makes the U.S. House more dysfunctional because you get a House that's less responsive to shifts in public opinion. The seats are engineered to be stable, regardless of the broader voter movement. These are all safe districts. Right now, 85% of the House seats are supposed to be safe districts. As this gerrymandering goes on and on, you'll find 95% of the House seats are safe. There's fewer and fewer House reps that really are in a position to do what's right for the nation instead of what's right for their party. The real accountability runs to the primary voters, not the general election voters. It's not just gerrymandering that does this, but gerrymandering is a big part of it. And if we're going to fix our political system so that our institutions are not polarized, are not rigid, so that there are better incentives for compromise, better incentives for procedural control rather than we need persuasion, not procedural control. We need to get out of this gerrymandering war. We just need to. And there's ways we can do it. There's two kinds of ways we can do it. We can do it by reforming the systems we have now. We can put in guardrails, stronger state constitution standards, independent commissions, transparent requirements, anti-collusion rules. These things can help change how the current system works. But as I said in the 2029, 2030 timeframe, we can make some big changes. And in that time frame, I'm hoping we can look at more fundamental changes. Because you know what? If the federal courts have stepped back from partisan gerrymandering, and if race-based path is too weak to do the job, we need structural reform. We have to ask not just how to regulate map abuse. How can we stop people drawing biased maps? But how can we redesign the whole system to provide representation that is not subject to abuse, where the kind of abuse through map drawing is not as helpful, is not as useful to politicians. And there are ways to do that. Let me talk about both these different ways we can move forward. We can move forward with the current system if we have better rules. So we don't want to, let's suppose for a moment, over the next couple of years, we don't want to redesign the system. We just want to make line drawing less self-serving, make line drawing, district drawing more transparent, more faithful to the real communities that are being represented. This can be done by taking map-making power away from the politicians, away from politicians whose careers depend on the outcome. Instead we assign that map-making task to independent, citizen-centered commissions and require those commissions to follow clear public rules. Rules like maps should preserve counties, municipalities, neighborhoods. They should keep recognized communities of interest together rather than deliberately splitting them apart for partisan advantage. And we need to have public hearings, open data, publish draft maps, opportunities for citizens to submit alternative maps. These are the kind of rules that we could put forth on the current system to take the power away from politicians who want to choose their voters and give power back to voters who want to choose their politicians. Independent citizen hybrid commissions instead of just letting the legislator do it, the state legislature do it. Strict eligibility rules that bar recent office holders, lobbyists, party operatives, and major political insiders from drawing these lines. Public criteria, such as equal population in each district, which ought to be required, Voting Rights Act compliance and protection of minority voting rights, contiguity and compactness. That is, we should not have districts that have tentacles stretching out like an octopus. They should be a community or an area of people who have common interests instead of trying to find people with common interests by having a something that stretches out throughout the state in little slenders to find people of one party or the other. We want to preserve counties, cities, neighborhoods, communities of interest. That's really the important thing. Communities of interest. And when people ask me what that means, well, you know what? We're talking about politics here. So, as far as I'm concerned, communities of interest means political interest. And we need this whole process to be done in a transparent manner with hearings, open source maps, public map submissions, and we have to have rules that either limit or actually forbid opportunistic mid-decade remaps, unless there's a court order or a census-based necessity. We can't let politicians just torque us around whenever they feel like it about this stuff. It's got to be done after a census when we all sit down together and figure out how we can fairly have each side fairly represented in Congress or in state legislatures. You know, we know this can work because there's a number of states that have done this already. California, Michigan, Colorado, several other states have taken redistricting away from the legislature and have given it to public commissions. They don't completely eliminate politics, but they do reduce the worst forms of partisan gerrymandering, and they do build public trust. You know, I've studied this stuff. I have looked at the level of gerrymandering by state, and I have seen that the states that use a citizen commission to redistrict, as opposed to states that let their legislatures, but their politicians do it, those states that have the citizens do it have about half the level of gerrymandering that you find in the other states. Now, as an aside, let me say, you know, I'm an engineer by training, and I trust that we can measure things and guide what we do through measurement. So I just want to tell you for a moment how we measure the gerrymandering's negative effects. How can I say it was 50% less? Well, here's how we do it. We have this principle. The principle is that, let's say a minority is 25% of your state's population. Well, to be fair, you want to see 25% of the state's legislative representation in the state legislature or in Congress be about 25% people of those views. But what you might see really is that maybe only 10% of the legislative representation represents those folks. And if you look at those two numbers, there's 25% of these people in the state, but only 10% of them are represented in the legislature. We call that a seat gap, a 15% seat gap. That's how we measure the damage that gerrymandering does. And as I said, when I measured that count between a statewide election, we measure a statewide election like a governor's race or a senator's race, where everybody in the state gets equal votes. We compare that to how the district-based legislatures end up. And if we see that, you know, Wisconsin's a great example. Wisconsin has one Democratic senator, one Republican senator, or a Democratic governor. So it's a kind of a 50-50 state when you look at the population as a whole. But until recently, the legislature, through gerrymandering, was 75% red. That's about a 25% seat gap between what the people of the state really want and what shows up in their legislature. And when I say I see half the gerrymandering in states that use a public commission, as opposed to states that let the legislature do it, that's the measure I'm talking about. That's how we measure gerrymandering. So that's an aside. Let's get back to the main discussion here. So if we're going to do what I said in terms of taking the current system and making it more fair, we have to stop the politicians from doing the redistricting. We have to require maps that follow communities, not partisan convenience. Compactness, communities of interest should be legal obligations, not afterthoughts. The people who are doing the redistribution understand that we can't have octopus districts. We have to have districts that represent real people's interests. If there's a blue dot in a red state, that blue dot should get a representative. And if there's a whole bunch of Republicans in a blue state, we got to form a district to make sure those Republicans get the appropriate representation. Look, in California, or probably true in Illinois, there's a lot of Republicans in rural communities. They're not the majority, but there's a lot of them. I mean, 35% of California. I'm not sure of the number here in Illinois, but it's probably similar. If we didn't have gerrymandering, you should have legislatures and Congress that fairly represents both those communities. 65% blue, 35% red. And we don't get that because both sides are gerrymandering to the point where you have 80% blue and 20% red. It's not fair to the minorities on either side. Now, states, there's another side I want to bring up here, and this is something that comes up when we talk about our form of government. I often have people who say, this country's not a democracy, it's a republic. You can't just let people vote. You let people vote, you'll have tyranny of the majority, and the majority will run right over the minority. And, I would say, well, that's why I have a Bill of Rights and all that. But let me point this out. All those states that moved their redistricting from the legislature to their citizen commissions, they were able to do it because those states allow citizen-initiated binding referendums. Because the politicians won't give up this power by themselves. We have to take it away from them. We have to get to the position where a direct democracy vote can say, no, you politicians can't choose your voters. We insist that voters choose the politicians. So that's a fine example of where a little bit of direct democracy can make this a better nation. That's another aside. Now let's talk about not just how we can make current map drawing better. Let's talk about what would be way better. What would just eliminate gerrymandering? And this is more ambitious. And maybe in the 2030 time frame, we can build a political will to do something like this. But instead of just trying to make map drawing better, why don't we think about a better way? And there is a better way. The value of a map comes from the fact that we can just draw this line a little differently here, a little differently there, and we can easily manipulate things with this all or nothing map drawing situation. But the right answer to this in the long term is what's referred to as proportional multi-member districts. And what that means is instead of having small single-member districts, which you can jiggle and juggle and gerrymander, you have large districts that incorporate 3 or 4 or 5 representative areas that would normally create multiple representatives. And instead of just having each little area choose one, you just allow the people in this whole area to have maybe 5 votes. They can vote for 5 guys. They can focus their 5 votes on one guy, or they can spread their 5 votes around 2 or 3 guys or 5 guys. And when you do that, you get representatives that are proportional to the people in that district, and you get a large district. You just can't slice and dice it to force the kind of voting situation that politicians want, where they can choose their voters. Once you use larger multi-member districts, line drawing becomes much less powerful. And that is, in the long term, the right way to solve this problem because it reduces the ability to gerrymander. This kind of reform doesn't just improve map making, it kind of takes map making partly out of the process. It changes the entire incentive structure that makes gerrymandering worth doing in the first place. If a significant minority can still elect someone, even in a district not fully controlled, then there's far less reason to carve up communities. So if you have a large district and you get 5 votes, and a minority can concentrate their 5 votes on one guy that represents them, that guy's going to get elected along with 4 other guys, and they'll have representation. That's why proportional multi-member districts are the right answer to this. You might think it's a big change, but it's the right change. It replaces single-member districts with fewer, larger multi-member districts, and it elects multiple representatives in each district. And it uses proportional ranked choice voting or another fair representation voting method. And this reduces the number of lines that must be drawn. It reduces the reward or ability for drawing them in a partisan manner. Now, in some smaller states, you might just have one statewide multi-member district. But this is the right kind of reform in the long run, and it's something we all need to keep our eye on as we get past the current MAGA madness. There's other things you can do. You can have a kind of a mixed member proportional representation, which combines local district seats with statewide or regional compensatory seats. It allows communities to keep local representation, but also ensures that the overall results better reflect how voters are actually divided. You can have district plus compensatory models. Fair vote and related reform literature discusses district plus as a proportional method suited to U.S. institutions. It's kind of like mixed member, keep districts, but add seats or rules. There's several different ways we can slice and dice this thing, but a major reform to get away from just single member districts that can be gerrymandered is what we want to see in the future. And states can set this example. Even if Congress doesn't change federal law, states can still do this kind of thing for their state legislatures. States can adopt these kind of things for their state legislatures. None has done so yet, but they could. Proportional systems are used locally in some elections, usually as remedies for vote dilution through gerrymandering, while all state legislatures still rely. I feel like Daffy Duck, suffering succotash. All state legislatures still rely on winner-take-all elections. So, as with ranked choice voting, this kind of reform is beginning to be used in some state and local elections, and we need to think about how we can expand it. But this stuff has happened in the past. A lot of people say, Ed, you're asking for a big change. It's untested. It's alien to how we do things. But that's not true. Here in Illinois, from 1870 to 1980, here in Illinois, we used a proportional multi-member system to elect the state house. And that matters because it gives us an American institutional memory to draw upon. We don't have to guess how this works. We can look to our past and see how it worked because it worked here. So here's how it worked here. For over 100 years, we had 3-member districts. Each voter had 3 votes and could divide them among 3 candidates or cast all 3 amongst a single candidate. That's a cumulative voting system. It gets kind of a proportional system. Now, in practice, the majority party in a district often won 2 seats, while the minority party won 1. So this kind of system stopped the kind of gerrymandering that just stops minority from having representation. Substantial minorities couldn't be shut out through this system. They often secured representation when they could not, even if they couldn't control the entire district. We have this history here in Illinois. A lot of people don't even know it. And that caused ideological and regional diversity more than a strict winner-take-all system would have. Republicans still won some seats in Chicago. Democrats still won some seats in downstate Republican areas. That was a more plural chamber. It gave the minority party voters a reason to stay politically engaged. And this is important. It's a representative system, shows that you should not turn political minorities into permanent, I don't like that word, nutilities, permanent disenfranchised people. And the old Illinois design softened that tendency. We did this here in Illinois before I was born. It really did reduce gerrymandering. And that brings us back to here and now. Winner take all single member districts, a little change here and there can change everything. But if you have multi-member semi-proportional districts, a little line change is not going to do anything. It's harder to wipe out the minority representation that way. Multi-member systems do not make map manipulation impossible, but they change how well it works, how well it can be used. They make exact lines less valuable as a weapon, which means they reduce one of the core incentives driving our modern gerrymandering wars. That's where we need to go 5 years from now, folks. Now, why did we stop? Well, we didn't stop because it didn't work. Oh, we stopped because there was a cutback amendment in 1980, which was basically a climate of anti-legislative frustration. There was a controversial pay raise for the legislatures. People were kind of upset with the legislature, and they just got rid of this thing. And this was in an era where most of the country had switched to single-member districts after the civil rights legislation. So this thing left Illinois out of political anger, not because it was not a good idea. But we could bring it back. We can bring it back without the risks that might have been available. The old system wasn't, I don't want to just replicate the old system, but the lesson here is that the principle works, not in just the historical detail of how we did it 100 years ago in Illinois. Modern reforms could use larger multi-member districts together with proportional ranked choice voting to preserve minority representation, reducing the ability to gerrymander through cumulative voting. This kind of reform would not just produce fair outcomes for all of us, it would go after the deeper design flaws that make map manipulation so profitable in the first place here. So, to summarize, our current legal political environment is telling us that we can't rely on judicial doctrines to save us from gerrymandering one case at a time. The underlying system is too permissive. It's too easy for politicians to choose their voters. The old distinctions between acceptable and unacceptable motives are inadequate. Nobody cares anymore about looking like being overly politically aggressive in terms of denying the votes of your political opponents. So we can't depend upon the racial way to control this. We have to confront gerrymandering as a structural problem in our democracy. I don't care if it's motivated by race, by party, by incumbent protection, for any other strategic purpose. Gerrymandering's got to go, period. Our own history reminds us that there are ways to do that. That's part of our nation's experience, and we need to remind people of that. You know, there's a bill in Congress right now. It's been brought up every session called the Fair Representation Act. It will replace single-member House districts with proportional ranked choice voting multi-member districts in larger states. It's in committee. It's not going to pass right now. But it shows that there are people who get it and who care and are trying to make improvements. And we need to find those guys and we need to support them. This kind of change doesn't require a constitutional amendment. This is just Congress could do. There's not much happening in states yet. We call states laboratories of our democracies. And Illinois was one when they were doing the 3-member districts. But there's some growing interest in states. Most state legislators are looking to study or recommend process reforms, not we're about to do something. But and even here in Illinois, the fight we have now is about shifting state legislative redistricting to an independent commission, the kind of the first phase approach, not yet about restoring 3-member cumulative voting or adopting proportional member districts. So states are thinking about it, and that means our call to action is to support states that are thinking about it. Support states that are thinking about taking the pen away from the politician and to demand transparent, community-driven map mapping. Push your members of Congress on national reforms. Build and join local anti-gerrymandering coalitions. Keep the focus on structure, not just the outcome. We don't want to just have an outcome that's good for our party and not their party. We want an outcome. We want a structure that is fair, so that if the country is leaning left, the government leans left. If the country is leaning right, the government leans right. We want a structure that is democratic and represents the will of the people. Support state reforms that take away the pens from politicians. Help take map drawing away from the legislature. Back ballot measures and the state constitution amendments that create or strengthen independent citizen redistricting commissions. Michigan and Ohio have done this. We can do it too. In our state or similar states, we need to join or support coalitions pushing for a commission or better state level rules. But this is important. Right now, we only want to do this for our state legislature, not for congressional districts. If we make our state fairer, that's the example for the rest of the nation. We can't do it for congressional districts yet because the red states won't do it. And if we do it for the U.S. House, we're disarming in this current redistricting war. So let's do it in our state to show people that we want our state to be fair and to set an example how our state would want to see our federal government run. And it's got to be transparent, community-driven map mapping so that communities of interest are kept together. The line drawing can't be in back rooms. We have to show up. We have to submit maps. We have to use tools. We have to make it politically painful to slice your community in half. Citizens can raise the political cost of gerrymanders. Learn your current districts and how they were drawn. Many groups provide simple primers, map viewers. Use the free mapping tools like Dave's Redistricting Districtor, Plan Score to analyze proposed maps and submit community maps that keep your area of interest together. And testify at public hearings. Submit written comments. Push for hearings after draft maps are released, not just before. Push your members of Congress on doing this kind of thing at a national level. Tell Congress we have to change the underlying rules. Without federal legislation, we can't solve this across all states. If we don't have federal legislation to stop gerrymandering, this war is going to continue. So your House members, your senators, they should co-sponsor measures like that Fair Representation Act I mentioned earlier and provide broader democratic packages, freedom to vote type bills, the ones that will amend the 67 single member district rule that the feds have that say the U.S. House has to be single member districts. Allow or even require proportional multi-member districts with ranked choice voting, and set a national baseline standard for fair congressional maps. This is not just about one cycle, one party. It's not just about 2026. It's about how we want a fairer system for the whole country going forward. Build and join local anti-gerrymandering coalitions. Don't fight this alone. You have friends. We have friends. Join those groups like Common Cause, Fair Vote, Brennan Center. Support them with your time and your money if you can. There are groups that are working on this stuff, and we need to support them. And as I said, it's structure we want. The courts won't fix this. The only way out of these gerrymandering wars is through politics. Citizens can change state constitutions. Citizens can change federal law. Ultimately, the electoral system itself, so that drawing a clever line for gerrymandering is not just the fastest way to win power. We want to give it now. The fact that the courts have retreated from this and have just said it's none of our business, you guys do what you want, means that our work is structural. We have to change the rules that our states and our federal government use in drawing maps so that maps can't be a weapon used against us. We have to look towards neutral structural principles. We don't want to be partisan in this. We want to be patriots in this. We want a system that is fair to all of us, even the rural red voters. We want to have fair competition. We want to have integrity of our communities. We want to have proportional representation, voters choosing their representatives instead of what we have now, which is representatives choosing their voters. You got to report reforms even when they don't obviously favor your party. We have to do this for all of us, not just for the blue people, but for all of us. So what we demand independent citizen commissions right now. We insist on clear map drawing rules, compactness, contiguity, respect for political subdivisions, protection of communities of interest. We need to, how we get it, we need to show up early, attend hearings, submit testimony, use mapping tools, propose fairer maps before insiders lock us out, support ballot initiatives, state constitutional amendments that take redistricting power away from the self-interested legislators in the longer term. Press Congress to back national reform in the longer term in the 2029-2030 timeframe, including Fair Representation Acts, multi-member districts, ranked choice voting, independent redistricting requirements, and join state and local reform coalitions. Because our sustained organizing, not just lawsuits, but our extended organizing to push the politics in the direction we need, that produces the best anti-gerrymandering changes so far. If you have some further reading here listed, you'll all get copies of these slides. This is a good overview from the Bipartisan Policy Center, how gerrymandering works. The Brennan Center has a good thing here on redistricting commissions, why and how that works. The Campaign Legal Center has independent redistricting commissions. There's citizen level, what we can do guides. There's the Loyola School of Law about how, all about redistricting, the national overview, structural reform that we need to push in the coming years through University of Chicago. Protect our democracy and unite America. And even state level activity, you can find some Fair Vote. Fair Vote is a big organization that's pushing proportional representation, fair representation acts at the state level. So you'll have these slides. You can pursue this stuff if you want to. But the bottom line is, we can't wait for the courts to rescue our representative democracy. If we're going to end this gerrymandering wars that are dividing us and taking away our power, we citizens have to change who draws the maps, change the rules they follow, and ultimately change the entire system that makes map manipulation a tool for politicians. So that's what I got to say. I'm all done. I'll be happy to take questions. Let me stop sharing my screen. Oh, that went away. How do I get that back? Okay, screen sharing has stopped. Great.
Are you ready yet? Breathe.
Yeah. Yeah.
You need that blizzard right now, right?
It's been a day, folks. I've had a lot going on today. So
I know.
thanks for your patience with me.
All righty, we will go to Bruce's question. In view of this week's shadow docket decision of the Supreme Court as to Alabama redistricting map, what's left of the Voting Rights Act and the basis for any redistricting challenges? There, the circuit court applied the Kaye analysis and still found interracial discrimination, but the Supreme Court allowed the intentionally racially discriminatory map to stand.
Yep, that's where we are. The Supreme Court is acting like they're just 100% on the side of allowing any kind of gerrymandering to happen. It's almost like they're just bluntly on the red side here. No, the Voting Rights Act is effing dead, and it's gone. We can't use a racial basis to stop this gerrymandering anymore. The courts have just killed all of it. We have to go after gerrymandering at its base. We can't just say you can't use gerrymandering against blacks or Latinos. We have to say you can't use gerrymandering at all against anyone, even if it's just the other party you're trying to diminish. You can't do any of this stuff anymore. So you're right. You're right. You're absolutely right. That thing that came down yesterday was the last nail in the coffin of the Voting Rights Act. It's completely dead. And you know what? The John Lewis bill, which looks at this on a racial basis, the Supreme Court will just kill that too. We can't do this on a racial basis. We have to just eliminate gerrymandering for any reason, not just a racial reason.
Our next question is from Heather. What can Americans do to prevent Trump from controlling/interfering with the outcomes of the midterm elections?
Great question. I'm very involved in election administration, and I pay a lot of attention to this stuff. And I got to tell you, the real problem here, the real threat here, is not that he's going to interfere in elections. He doesn't have any real ability to do that. The real threat is not the ability for him to interfere in elections. It's for him to challenge the result in court. That is the real threat here. The real threat is that, like right now in California, they're counting mail ballots. And Trump is out there saying the Republicans are in better shape, but they're continuing to count mail ballots, and more Democrats vote on the mail ballot side. So as the mail ballots come in, it's deteriorating the Republican situation, it's strengthening the Democratic situation, and this is all fraudulent. And we have to stop this from happening. We have to challenge this in court. We have to say, stop counting those late ballots. They're all fraudulent, and just take the result as it was at midnight on election day. That kind of challenge is what we need to worry about. We're worried about ICE at the polls. We're worried about misinformation. We're worried about real election interference. But those aren't the big worries. Those are pretty small worries, because we're going to have a big turnout here. The real worry is that he's going to challenge it in the courts. And the real worry is that the Supreme Court will step in and do something like they did to Al Gore. That's the real worry. And I'm going to tell you what the election administrator's prayer is before an election. Election administrators pray for good weather and a big, wide margin. They don't want to see a close election, because a close election is easy to challenge. But when you have a big, wide margin, it's hard to challenge it in court. So that's our prayer for a big, wide margin in November. If we swamp them and overwhelm them, the ability of Trump to challenge that stuff in court is gone. So the real threat is not really screwing with the election. The real threat is the ability to challenge it in court afterwards. And the way to solve that is to just outvote them by 5%, 6%, 7%. When you have a big margin, election administrators say, we're done. It's obvious. We know who won. Challenge it all you want. That's nonsense. That's where we need to be.
We will go to Peter's question. What would a fair districting map look like?
Well, that's not an easy question to answer. But as I mentioned, in the very long run, if you want to look at it from a racial lens, or I look at it from a political lens, in a state, if you've got 45% Democrats and 55% Republicans, your state legislature, your congressional delegation should be 45% blue and 55% red, or someplace near that. But if your state is 45% blue and 55% red, and your delegations are 80% red and 20% blue, that's not fair. That's not fair to the minority in your state. That runs either way. If it's a blue state with a red minority, or a red state with a blue minority, whether it's a racial view or a political view or whatever the view you want to take, a fair representation means that when you look at a statewide election like a governor's election or a senator's election, and you see that the state is this much red and that much blue, or this much red and that much black, or whatever dimension you want to choose, the resulting legislature, the state legislature or the federal legislature, should have somewhere near the same proportion. And if the people in power can use gerrymandering to diminish the votes of some minority they don't want to see in power, so that instead of it being close to the 45, 55, whatever it was, it ends up 80-20, that's not fair. I mean, that's the basic answer to that question. And getting that right through making little maps that these single member maps, these single member districts, it's hard to do that. But when you take larger maps, take a map that includes 4 or 5 what would be currently normal representatives, and you give the people in that larger district proportional votes that they can allocate as they wish, you will end up with a closer approximation to what the population really is. So that's my best answer to that. I hope that's helpful. And if it's not, you can come back with some more detailed questions.
Robert is asking, is there a legal way to require geographical maps, which would be fair to me or seem fair to me?
Okay, so let's talk about that. First of all, congressional districts were originally established within each colony before the Union existed. The Virginia colony, the Massachusetts colony, they all created legislatures that had 2 houses. One house, the lower house, the House of Representatives, was proportional to the population. The other house, the upper house, the state Senate, was geographically based. And that's how the federal Congress is right now. The federal Congress has the House of Representatives, which is proportional to the population, and the U.S. Senate, which is geographically based, 2 senators for each state. Well, in the 1970s, the U.S. Supreme Court said you can't have state senates that are geographically based because that means all votes don't count equally. You might have a geographic base in Chicago and some geographic bases downstate, but so you've got 5 million people in Chicago that get 1 representative and 100,000 people in some downstate to get 1 representative. That means that all votes don't count equally. The people in Chicago just get 1 representative for 5 million people. The guy downstate gets 1 representative for 500,000 people. The Supreme Court required that state senates must be proportional to the population and not geographically based, because that means that each person has the same political power in both houses. So the Supreme Court has said we can't have geographically based Senate districts in state legislatures. And we all had to change our state legislatures to make them proportional. Now, of course, they can't apply to the U.S. Senate because that's in the U.S. Constitution. But so we can't have geographically based. Now, that doesn't mean that when we do redistricting, we shouldn't consider geographical considerations. We certainly can. But the most important thing about state level redistricting or any level redistricting I think about is to keep communities of interest together. Here's a perfect example. I'll give you 2 examples. One is recently in Tennessee, Memphis was 1 House district, and it's a Black community, it's a Democratic community in a sea of red, and they had 1 House district, which is a state that maybe had 5 red districts. I don't know exactly where we are in Tennessee, but Memphis was 1 state, and after the recent Supreme Court decision, Memphis redistricted in a manner that cut Memphis up into 3 sections, each section extending out into the state enough to collect white voters to override those Black voters. And those Black voters who were Democrats in Memphis no longer have a representation in Congress in the new year because of how the redistricting occurred. But it's not always just racial. The same thing happened in North Carolina, Asheville, North Carolina. Asheville, North Carolina was a blue dot in a red state, and it wasn't racially based. It was just a bunch of white folks that think the way some of us do about how politics should happen. It was a blue dot in a red state. And last time around, or 2 times ago around, they did the same thing to them, cut them up into 3 districts and extended way out into 100 miles out into the rural area to collect enough red votes to dilute the blue votes so that 1 blue representative that was Asheville disappeared in her sea of red. So this stuff happens, and it's not just racially based. It's really politically based. And I've gotten so far into this answer, I can't remember the question. What was the question again?
I will repeat it. Is there a legal way to require geographical maps, which seem fair to me?
Okay, no. Geographical maps are not legal under SCOTUS, but maps that keep a community of interest together, we could have laws that require that. We could have laws. We don't, but we could have laws that require that community of interest be kept together. So it could be done legally, and I hope that in the upcoming time frame, it can be done legally. I lost my screen. Oh, the computer's coming up.
Oh, no.
I'll get you back. Hang on. Yeah. Oh. Okay, I'm back.
I see you there, Ed. Okay, let's go to the next question from Andrew. Isn't the U.S. Census supposed to be the be end all final word in the equitable distribution of voting districts based on population and not voting preference?
Well, not quite. I mean, the way things have worked traditionally, I think the law requires that after the census, the states redistrict, because after the census, we know how populations have shifted between states. And we know that some states might have lost voters to another state, and maybe some state should have one fewer House rep, and another state should have one more House rep. So redistricting is required to happen after a census so that we continue to see that the House districts are equally proportioned and that each state has as many representatives in the House as their shifting population currently represents. So that is supposed to happen every 10 years after the census. One time. This idea that parties can choose to redistrict after that, mid decade redistricting is not something required by the federal laws. It's something that states choose to do when they just want to beat up their political opponents. So I hope that answers the question. If not, please come back for more detail.
Okay, Peter's question. But don't we need to rely on the politicians to effect these reforms? How likely is it that they will go along?
Well, as I mentioned, all the states that have made these reforms right now do it through binding referendums that the population can force onto a ballot. So yes, in the broadest sense, we can't expect politicians to give up this power. But with enough votes, that might change.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if we all took a litmus test and said, "I'm not going to vote for you unless you are in support of community redistricting," maybe we can get there, or maybe we have to take a two-step approach. Maybe we have to first convince our politicians to allow um, binding referendums proposed by population. I mean, other states have done it that way. Maybe we should do it that way too. But the bottom line is that politics is all about electing people that do what you want them to do. And if what we want is a different way to redistrict or a different form of redistricting, we need to use our votes to make it happen. And if we have to do it in a two-step or a three-step manner, maybe we need to do it that way. Just get involved with the groups that are working on this, because the groups that are working on this will do a better job of getting us there than I can myself. I'm just right now making sure we all understand the problem and we all understand what we need to do and we all understand how we need to find a way to pitch in. And I don't have every absolute answer to this, but I'm pointing us in the right direction here.
And I think you answered Peter's second question, which was, will these reform recommendations be made available to us? Can you offer some recommendations on how we can work to make this happen in our states? So I believe you did answer that.
Well, we're going to send these slides out. You'll find the names of groups in these slides that you can hook up with. You'll find the names of legislation that we want to support. If you want to get more directly involved and you're not quite sure about how to do it, you'll find my email address on the first page of this presentation. You can get in touch with me and I will do my best to get you hooked up with people that can help this move forward.
Okay. Lawrence in Maryland, is there any potential for public financing for elections to replace the unfettered PAC and private pay for influence financing in elections today?
Well, first of all, that's really off topic from this presentation, sir. We're here to talk about gerrymandering and not public finance. I do agree with you that that money in politics is a major problem. And I do agree with you that we need to find ways around that, but it's not the topic for today, and it's not something I'm prepared to address in detail right now. I'm sorry.
All right, we will go to Nora's question. The major problems are due to Supreme Court rulings. Their decisions don't follow precedents and often aren't logical. The shadow docket is even worse because they don't give a reason for their ruling. Even though we may win in 2028, will we have the same or maybe worse Supreme Court? Do you think that court reform needs to be addressed now?
Well, yes, I do, but I also think that there's you just can't surrender to the court. Let me be clear about this. The court is not the last word. Congress is. When the court says some law you've passed can't work, I'm going to strike it down. Congress is supposed to come back with another law that addresses the grievance the court had and reinstitutes what Congress wants in a way that will be more defensible. So we don't just surrender to the Supreme Court. Sure, we should have reforms in the Supreme Court. And once again, that's not a topic for today. We've had other presentations about that. There are things we can do about the Supreme Court. But most importantly, we have to have a functioning legislature that pushes back against the Supreme Court and says, we're going to reestablish the John Lewis Voting Rights Act and tell you that despite your view that we don't need it anymore, we think we do continue to need it. And if the Supreme Court comes back and strikes that down, then Congress comes back and says, okay, how's this? We'll just outlaw gerrymandering completely. What are you going to do about that, Supreme Court? The Congress is in control of this country, not the Supreme Court, not the presidency, the Congress. The Congress writes our laws. We vote for congressmen. Vote for congressmen that will write the laws we want and stick them up the you-know-what of the Supreme Court and slam on the head of the administration. Congress does this. And when we get a Congress that is responsive to what we want, we can get our Congress to do this. And sure, we should reform the Supreme Court, but more importantly, we should build a Congress that is responsive to what we want and will pass the laws that we want. And that is the real vision of this country by our founders. And that's the vision that we need to make happen. And there have been other presentations about how we make a Congress that works. We can make a Congress that works. We're going to make a Congress that's better in 2026. We can make a Congress that's even better than that in 2028 with a presidency that'll back it up. And that's how we can get the major reforms that I envision coming after this catastrophe of the Trump administration in after 2028, in a 2029, 2030 time frame. We need Congress to reform a lot of things, including eliminating gerrymandering. And the Supreme Court, once the Congress says political gerrymandering is illegal, the Supreme Court is going to have to go along with that. Right now, all they can say is there's nothing in the Constitution, there's nothing in federal law that makes the gerrymandering illegal. If the Congress says it's effing illegal, then it is, and the Supreme Court is going to have to go along with that. Sorry for being overly emotional about this, but I am very emotional about this.
That you are, Ed. But we will go to Nancy's question. What is the position of Illinois on gerrymandering? Has J.B. Pritzker spoke on this issue?
I don't think so. I think that um, here in Illinois, the people need to speak. We can't expect any of our politicians to give up the power of gerrymandering that they have. There are bills in the state legislature right now that would um, turn um, redistricting over to um, a citizen commission for the state legislature, and I support that bill. Uh, Find the legislators who support it. Talk to your legislature. Let me give. I'm gonna. Here's an aside. One of the things I do is I work on gun violence prevention, and I was in Springfield a few days ago trying to talk to my representative about gun violence legislation because there's a bill we want to pass. I couldn't find him. I couldn't lay my hands on him. I couldn't make him listen to me. I come back and I say, okay, what I'm going to do over the summer is I'm going to find that guy in district. I'm going to make an appointment with him in district. I'm going to go talk to him in his office. I'm going to tell him, I know the guy. I grew up in his community. He went to the same high school I went to. I'm going to tell him this is why your firefighters unions should support this bill. That's the kind of political action that we need to undertake. Find your representative. Find your state senator. Go talk to him face to face. Tell him what you want him to support. That's how we can get bills passed in Illinois. We can't depend on Pritzker to do it or anybody else to do it. We have to do it. We have to do it by finding our legislators and confronting them face to face and telling them what we want. So the situation in Illinois is there is support. There are people, there are legislators in Illinois who have put forward a bill to provide a citizen commission for redistricting for the state legislature, for the state house and the state senate. And I support that, and I will tell my representatives to support it, and you need to do the same. But we are not going to do that for the U.S. House of Representatives. Because if we do that for the U.S. House of Representatives, when Texas won't and Florida won't, then we're unilaterally disarming. So we'll do it for the state legislatures to set the right example, to make sure that representation in our state is fair. But we won't do it for the federal Congress because it's got to come down from the feds, from the federal legislation, so that it impacts all states and not just blue states.
Mary Ann's question. Since we do not have the right of initiative as California does, how do we amend our state constitution so that the voters can demand by petition to amend the state constitution by the people's vote?
There's two ways to do this. One is to push your legislators to enact the changes that you want to see happen. The other way to do is to push your state legislators to enable binding a referendum here in the state. I mean, there's no magic answer. Those are the two obvious ways we can go forward. So I urge you, if you're interested in this particular topic, to hook up with the groups that are strategically trying to move it forward in our state, and work with them, because they have better answers than I do on that. But clearly, politics is how we get what we want from our legislators. Either we push them to do what we want, or we push them to enable us to have binding referendums so that we can go around them. I mean, that is the method that has worked in other states.
Okay, Ed, here's another one for you from Lawrence. Is there any effort underway to overturn the disastrous Citizens United decision by the Supreme Court?
Again, you're going off topic here.
I know.
We're talking about gerrymandering here. I have been okay. I'll address this as best I can in a minute. I've been very involved in this kind of stuff. For a long time, I have believed that Congress could fix this without a constitutional amendment.
Mhm.
Recent research has kind of taught me that maybe we actually do need a constitutional amendment to fix this. So I'm thinking that this is one of the kind of things that we can't address right now. Right now, we're in a sinking boat. We have to plug the leaks. We have to make sure this boat doesn't capsize and kill us all. We have 2026, we have 2028, in 2029 or 2030. That's the time to think about these things. We can build towards it, but we're not going to get a constitutional amendment through right now. Maybe in 2029 or 2030, when we look back at what the heck just happened and how our country almost went under, we can build the political will to get a constitutional amendment through to overturn CU. But I don't have much more to say about this right now because it's really off topic from this presentation.
Oh, I know. But Ed, I will just let you know that Hawaii's governor signs first of its kind legislation to circumvent Citizens United. Legal
Yep,
challenge is expected.
yep, and that's very interesting. There's and Hawaii's not the only state doing this. There's a number of states, I think Wyoming is one, which has said state governments have the power to control political money within their state.
Yes.
So once again, this is an area where states as laboratories of democracy could overturn this. But the the thing in Hawaii is going to get challenged in court, and we'll see where it gets. I mean, it's not clear. It's not clear that SCOTUS is going to support that. Uh, it's an interesting situation, and yes, I do see the possibility of some progress there. But once again, I'm sorry, it's off topic for this
I
discussion.
know. Anyway, Nora is asking, in her question, I think Musk proved that you can buy an election. If PAC money is allowed, how can we truly have fair elections?
Again, you're off topic from
Now,
what we're talking about here. We're talking about gerrymandering. I'll give
gerrymandering,
you a
yeah.
simple answer. I'll give you a simple answer, though. The simple answer is if they got a billionaire that can buy an election, so do we. So, as long as money is allowed to be speech, we just have to come up with our own billionaires like JB who can buy their election. Um, but yes, in the long run, we have to get money out of politics. And in the long run, we have to defeat Citizens United. And we have to hope that the kind of approaches that Hawaii and Wyoming are taken will withstand court challenge. And yes, we need to work on this as a multifaceted approach, which means we have to reform the Supreme Court so the Supreme Court can't just shoot down these state efforts to control this stuff. And it's just such a wide topic that it's way off topic for this discussion of gerrymandering. Thank you very much.
It is. It is.
Ah,
I know. Colleen is asking what happened in 1967 that changed congressional maps to a single member.
what happened in 1967 is that when the federal government was passing um, civil rights legislation, they recognized that without proper regulation of proportional multi-member districts, they themselves could be used to undermine minorities. If they're not properly regulated, you could find proportional multi-member districts used as a way to just ensure that minorities never get a representative. So rather than figuring out how to properly implement proportional multi-member districts, they just decided to ignore the problem and just go back to the simple solution of single member districts. That's why federal law required single member districts for federal offices, for the US House. That doesn't mean that states can't use proportional multi member districts for state legislatures. Nobody does, but they could. Illinois used to, but they don't anymore. But one of the things I want to see happen in the run up to 2030 time frame, when we can consider federal revisions of how we elect our federal representatives, is for states to seriously consider these kinds of things. So that's why in the 67 time frame, the federal government outlawed it. It was still used. It was still used in Illinois beyond that, because the federal law only talks about the U.S. Congress. It doesn't talk about state houses. And Illinois continued to use their 3-member districts up until the 80s, when people got angry at the Illinois legislature and killed it. So that's why the federal government made the ruling they made in 67.
Hey, Lillian has a question. If things don't change, can gerrymandering occur anytime during the 10-year census cycle?
Yes, that's what's happening right now, which is why things got to change.
Change it. Okay, now some of these may relate to voting, Ed. So Amy is asking, can we require everyone to vote as Australia does? More people don't vote than vote currently.
Okay, it's off topic, but I'm
Off
happy to
topic, yeah.
address it. I'm happy to address it. Personally, I don't want to force people to vote who haven't thought about why or who they're going to vote for. I would like people, hopefully, who have thoughtfully thought about who they want to vote for. And I see people occasionally, more than occasionally, on social media asking, "How should I decide who to vote for?" Now, I'll just give it my answer. I mean, the first part is, what's their platform? Are they proposing to do things that you want to see done? I mean, if you're a rural farmer, do they see platform that'll help you? If you're a poor person in a city, do you see platform issues that will help you? Look at the platform. Look at what the guy says he's going to do. But then also look at his character. Is he a known liar? Can you trust what he says? I mean, if he's a known liar, then it doesn't matter what he says. There's no sense voting for him. Or look at his record of achievement. Has he been able to make things happen in government? If you like what he says, you believe he's telling the truth, you know that he can make things happen in the government because he's done it in the past, that's your man. But if you don't like what he says, or if he's a liar and you can't believe him, or if he has no record in government, I mean, maybe he's a good businessman, but that's not government. Government is completely different from business. Business is there to make a profit. Government is here to serve the people. Those are two very different things. So those are my 3 guides on how to figure out who to vote for. Do you like what he says? Is he honest? Can he deliver? If you like what he says, you believe he's honest and he can deliver, vote for him. And if you don't like what he says, or if you can't trust what he says, or if he has no record of delivering, then find somebody else. So once again, I'm going off on a tangent here. Did I answer the question that was asked?
I hope you did. Oh, Ed. It was, can we require everyone to vote as
I don't want
Australia
to.
does?
I don't
So,
want.
yeah.
I don't want to require people to vote. I want to encourage them to figure out how to vote sensibly using the kinds of principles I just espoused.
And we have a hand raise. Would you like to take that?
If we're done with other questions, it's almost 9 o'clock. Yeah,
Yes.
let's see what Shannon has to say.
Okay, Shannon, if you can unmute, please.
Hi.
Hi.
First I want to say, it's so good to hear you talk about the representatives. It's representative government, which should revolve around the representatives. that's just wonderful, because when people get lost, they need to know that. But my question is, so the districts are so gerrymandered now, we don't even need to pretend that they have anything to do with location anymore, because they don't. So what if we just have districts drawn by prioritized interests? So like we can have a bunch of interests like Sierra Club, NAACP, uh, whoever banking. They can list interests, and then the people can go and prioritize them, and then the districts can be drawn around what those people want. And then the candidates, you can have 5 candidates who run for those issues, and then it's really easy to tell whether or not whether they're a good.
Sure. What you're describing, Shannon, is basically what you get when you let the community members do redistricting. The community members will bring forth those same kinds of concerns. I'm concerned. My group of people are concerned about the environment. My people are concerned about economy. My people are concerned about this, that, or what other. And you have to kind of put those different things into a melting pot and figure out how to draw lines that keep those communities of interest together instead of dividing them to dilute their votes. And the one thing we have found in our country that works along those lines is to take redistricting away from the politicians in the legislature and give it to community groups where those kinds of interests you just described can be brought forth in community groups. This has worked in several states, and that's the short-term solution. The longer-term solution is to just make bigger districts with multi-member voting, so that people can find a candidate that supports their desires. I hope that answers the question for you, Shannon. I see Garrick has his hand up. Garrick, you want to unmute and just we got about I want to have about 7 minutes here. It's 9 o'clock. I'd like to get off of here.
Okay, just one moment, Garrick. Give me a moment here. Tamara put a question in there in the chat for you, which I think is probably a good question.
Okay.
Most people do not know basics of government. How can groups like Indivisible and political parties re-engage voters and educate new ones? Perhaps the new Obama Center opening on June 19th can be a start to mobilize people who have interest in public policy and democracy. We need to get results, not just from elected officials or an ad or a 10-second announcement asking people to vote and change the system. Thank you.
Well, I have my way of doing this. It's to have a monthly Zoom and explain stuff to people, and have 100 people show up. And what y'all need to do is to get more people to come to these things, or start your own, or there's new Indivisible chapters opening up every week. There are people who are stepping up to do the kind of things I do, to educate their community, their family members, their church members. You can invite me to come speak. You can take what I just said to you and learn it and repeat it and spread it. This is a grassroots situation, and I'm just one piece of grass here, and all of you guys are another piece of grass. So you need to grow those grass seeds the same way that I'm doing it. And we need to saturate the country with these kinds of presentations. I'll be happy to repeat these kinds of presentations. My slides are available to you. Take them and run with them. Anything I can do to empower you to do what I do, but there's nobody who's going to do this except us chickens. So let's all just do more of this. I don't know what else to tell you.
I thought for certain you would say you were a snowflake and that now you're a blizzard, but that's okay.
No, I'm the
Not
snowflake. Bill,
grass.
I'm the snowflake. Bill's the blizzard. So
There you go, Bill. All right,
Garrett,
let's go to
Garrick,
Garrick.
Garrick, unmute. What do you have to ask or say?
Hi, Ed. Wonderful presentation once again. I have a question. 2 days ago, California had their primary, and it was described as a jumbled primary in which we had both Democrats and Republicans in the same bucket of voting. How does that compare to redistricting? Is there any correlation to that?
There isn't, but there's an important point. I'm glad you brought it up because the kind of primary you saw just happened in California is something we should all understand. First of all, the term for the kind of primary they run is a jungle primary,
okay.
not a jumble primary. Okay. So this is an important point. I'm glad you brought it up. I'm happy to spend my last 3 minutes talking about this. So here's the situation. We have tons and tons of safe districts where one side or the other is sure to win. Last time we had a House election, 85% of the House seats were effectively elected in primaries, not in the general election, because the primary was in a safe district. 85% of these House seats are safe districts, sure to be won by the red side or the blue side. And that means that the House representative is really elected in the primary, not in the general. And the primary, as we all know, is a low turnout thing. It's controlled by party extremists. And when party extremists know that whoever they nominate is going to get elected, they'll just nominate a radical candidate. And you get AOCs on one side, and you get extreme right guys on the other side who win in the general election because they're in safe districts. And you get a legislature that's polarized more than the general population is, and a legislation that can't compromise for the good of the nation. And the way to get around this is to get rid of the party primary. We can't get rid of gerrymandering. Even if we did, we still have self-sorting. You still have all the red people moving to rural areas and all the blue people moving to cities. You'd still have safe districts, even if you got rid of gerrymandering. But if you get rid of the partisan primary, if you have a primary where everybody can vote, then you can get out of this trap. But the way California does it is wrong. The jungle primary that California and some other states do, they just take the top two out of the primary into the general. And a lot of times that means you just get 2 Democrats in the general or 2 Republicans in the general. That's not fair. You want a real choice in the general election. And the way now, fortunately, this cycle in California, they are ending up with a Democrat and a Republican coming out of the primary. So they'll have a real choice in their general election for governor. And the Democrat's going to win because it's California and there's way more blue voters than red. But at least it's not 2 Democrats running. So I want to tell you what Alaska did. Alaska implemented the right solution. The right solution is you have a nonpartisan primary, everybody can vote it, but you don't just take 2 candidates. You take 4 or 5. When you take 4 or 5 candidates, you get both the kind of Sarah Palin radical candidates, you get some moderate candidates. This is called the Final 5 voting system, a nonpartisan primary. Probably takes 4 or 5 candidates into an RCV general election, and that allows moderate candidates to get through to the general election, and then the moderates win in the general election because the general election voters are not as radical as the primary voters. This has worked in Alaska twice now, where Palin ran and got through to the general election, but so did moderate candidates, and the moderate candidates won in the general election instead of Palin. So that the what you see in the jungle primaries that California does are not quite right. What you see in the final five voting system that Alaska does, that's the way to stop safe districts from causing a legislature which is more radical than the general election voters. And I'm glad you asked that question. I'm glad to spend the last couple of minutes talking about that. And I'd like to be done now,
Well,
if that's okay.
All righty. And Ed, just to let you know, we have your blizzard next.
Okay, go ahead, Bill.
All right, Bill. Up, need you to unmute, Bill.
You're still muted, Bill.
No, he's unmuted now.
Okay, great. Well, so Ed, I posted the link to tonight's video several times in this, and I see that we've already had about 16 people are watching it. And I wonder if you could put the link to your slides. Do you have that available?
I can get it real quickly here. Let me.
Okay. Then while you're doing that, let me fill for a few minutes. A huge thank you from all of us at NWSOFA and everybody that has attended tonight for the time and the energy you put into this presentation. And that gives you the okay to get a little up, to get a little strong on some of your answers, which I totally appreciate, and I think everybody does. The comments in the chat very positive on everything, and we really had some great information here that popped up. I really kind of enjoyed tonight. The last question or the last statement, I would say, somebody had said, when is your next presentation going to be? And I was wondering if that was going to be the last Monday of this month. Or do you want to do it in the first week of next month?
Well, no, I wanted to do this in May, and it just didn't work out. So I'd like to do one towards the end of June. And I just want you all to understand that this is not just somebody asking this. This is Bill asking this. Bill is always pushing, you know? I mean, that's how what a good leader does. He pushes people to step up. And so here today, right now, Bill's pushing me to step up. Let me see what's going on July 29th, which is the last Monday. I can commit to a presentation on July 29th. Excuse me, June 29th. Bill, I will commit to a presentation on June 29th. You can put that on the calendar. I don't know what the topic's going to be. People who are familiar with what I do, you're happy to write to me and propose a topic. I just saved the PDF version of this presentation. Let me put it on Dropbox so that I can give you a link to it. This is here. Yeah, so the June 29th, we'll have another presentation on June 29th.
So Ed, there was no pressure on that. I just know how much everybody enjoys you. You get some of the best attendance and RSVPs, and then I must have had 20 people that I have sent out that link because they said they couldn't get here tonight, but they didn't want to miss your presentation. You know, you really made a name for yourself, and everybody. I don't know, when we say that we have 30, actually it's about 35 now, all volunteer members that work on both the communications and the issue teams. It's basically 10 working on the communications and 8 to 10, and then the rest of them all work on these issue teams, and the quality has been great. Now the quality has really improved over the last couple of years because Ed has set the standard, which is really good. And number two is people are coming from all across the country here. Matter of fact, I didn't check to see if Ramiz was on from India or Bob from Ecuador, but anyway, they come from all over. And when you really get people that are spending an upper hour to 2 hours of their nights to come to these presentations, our presenters really, really work to give you a full motherload of information. Remember those three things that we said in the very beginning. We want to make sure that you have the facts. We want to make sure you're able to use those facts and you know when and how to use them during conversations. And then when you're in front of those three groups, the one person or two people that you're having coffee with, or the family members around the kitchen table, or a group meeting that you're leading, that you can, that these words fall like gold or pearls right out of your lips. You don't even know you're saying them because you heard them someplace. It was from Ed Spire. Maybe you won't remember Ed Spire, but you will remember that it's solid information. So anyway, I just wanted to say that. Ed, did I give you enough time to put them in?
Yeah, I just put the
Yes.
link in the slide, the link to a PDF of the slides into the chat.
Okay. And I will put that out tomorrow along with the video. And onward and forward. Thank you so much, Ed, for all your time, all your effort, and for everybody on this call. Thank you for being on this call. We had 128 people join us tonight. We had a high water mark of 108. And right now, we still got 42 people on there.
Yeah, well, it's not enough. I just threw all y'all a ball. Pick that ball up and run with it. We need to get these messages out widely. So thank y'all for being here, and don't just listen to me. Repeat this stuff. Find a way to send these messages out to the wider community. Thank you all. Thank you, Bill, for what you do.
Ed, one thing. Tamara asked a question, not a question, she made a statement about educating people on civic, on how, not civics, but how our government works. And you had a great answer that basically you picked up the ball and you are doing it one time a month to educate people. But I really think maybe tomorrow at our coffee and conversation, 9 a.m. Central, everybody, same Zoom link as you joined tonight. I think I'll try to toss this out. And Debbie, if I forget of it, would you bring it up to see if somebody wants to kind of take the reins on actually that subject of how government works? And that could be cool.
Bill, don't
Yes.
you usually say that the person who brings it up should do it?
Yes.
Oh
But
yeah,
I'm
come on. Bill is so busy
He
doing
does enough, I
everything.
know.
Bill is so busy doing everything that one of the important things is that we can't all just depend on a guy like Bill. We can't do that because he's working, Bill is working all day, every day on this stuff, and there's only so much of Bill. We have to all do this stuff.
Even
And
when
we
he's
have
on
we
his
have
back.
and one of the best things Bill could do is teach us how he does it so that we can all learn to be as effective as he is in community organizing, because that is what the key is here. All right, look, it's 10 after 9. I want to go.
It
Good night.
is. Good night,
See-
Ed. Hope you're
see-
doing better.
Okay, see you all now.
Good night.